Hello and welcome to the Critical Podcast on iCode Media. Today I had a great conversation with Drs. Melissa Barnett and Pam Lowe, and we talked about presbyopia and all the options we have related to presbyopia in terms of spectacle lenses, pharmaceuticals, contact lenses, surgical options. It was a real fun conversation to kind of put some parameters on that and explore their ideas and their communication techniques that they use with their patients. So please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us.
Getting young presbyopes into progressive lenses can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Verilux Liberty 3.0 lenses are an introductory solution for new and young presbyopes, and they are available in select ad powers. This lens provides all-in-one balanced vision for an accessible and great first-time progressive lens wearing experience. Learn more about Verilux Liberty 3.0 lenses and get free resources to help start the progressive lens conversation with young presbyopes at EssilorPro.com/Verilux.
So thanks both of you for coming on. Pam, you and I have had a long history in terms of professional relationship, and I've looked to you for a lot of guidance in a lot of things over time. And Melissa, I've watched you from afar because I get to read a lot of your pieces and I get to read a lot of and see a lot of the stuff you're doing, but I haven't actually gotten the chance to interact with you. So I'm really excited to communicate with both of you today about some topics mainly related to presbyopia. And so thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Pam and Melissa, when you think about, the sort of tide, we've heard a lot about tides recently with hurricanes and elections. But when you think about the tide that is coming within presbyopia, give me some perspective on kind of the data and the numbers related to, who is existing with presbyopia? What do they look like in terms of the workforce? And then who's coming? What do we have to be prepared for as optometrists?
Sure. Hold on a quick second here, because I wanted to pull something.
I can
pull something up real quick. Okay, but you go ahead, Pam.
Yeah, no, I just say, Chris, great point. Melissa and I wrote a paper called The Presbyopic Tsunami. And it's really more than just a refractive error when like 1.8 billion people with a B worldwide have presbyopia. The prevalence has just never been this high. And when you look just in the U.S. here, millennials just overtook baby boomers in numbers, and baby boomers are all firmly presbyopic. Gen X is right behind them, and they're of presbyopic years. And so when you have the oldest millennial who turned 40 last year, that's just mind-blowing, the number of people in the U.S. alone that are.
So Pam or Melissa, Pam, can you kind of put a bracket around, we hear baby boomers, millennials. Sometimes I don't think I'm a millennial, but based on kind of some numbers I've seen recently, I am the oldest. Gen Xers. No, millennials. I would be the oldest millennial. So kind of give me a framework of when you think about those categories, what are those birth dates and age ranges right now?
Sure. I'll hop in here. So millennials, and it kind of depends a little bit on what source you're looking at and things like that. But millennials are generally born 1981 to 1996. So they're entering their 40s. And there are lots of millennials now that are actually becoming presbyopic, which is so interesting. And then baby boomers are like 1946 to 1964. So that almost 72 million people. And so it's just this huge, huge opportunity. And I think one thing also that we have to mention are all those people buying over-the-counter reading glasses. So 31 million, 33 million people in the US buying over-the-counter reading glasses. So we have this huge opportunity to stress the importance of eye health and eye exams, which is so, so critical in this presbyopic population.
Well, Pam, you made a comment about how presbyopia is not necessarily related to just a refractive error. Do you want to expand about your thoughts on that and how, if we're going to communicate it, as Melissa was talking about, in terms of it's not just about getting reading glasses. Look, I had LASIK years ago, or I've always had. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, my age, 41, and it wasn't a patient, but we were having dinner, and she made the comment, well, yeah, I get some headaches at the end of the day, and yeah, this and yeah, that, but I'm not a glasses wearer. I don't wear glasses. I have perfect vision, she says. Okay. And so I'm thinking, like, how do we communicate that message that, one, it is a refractive issue that leads to some of these other issues like headaches, eye fatigue, eye strain. Even now we know, in terms of things like neck aches and other things where we're not performing very well and not performing optimally. But how do we communicate the healthcare aspect of it? Because it really is, as you think about it, it's a physiologic change. It's a physiologic change that is normal, but it's not so is it non-pathological? I mean, so how do we communicate that, Pam?
Yeah, great point, Chris. Just like you gave a great example of your friend who said, well, I could just put reading glasses on. I love when I go to parties and someone finds out you're an eye doctor, and then they'll go, I've never worn glasses, and I just go to the drugstore and I can put on some glasses for reading and I'm fine. And I'm like, great, did the checkout girl tell you if you have signs of glaucoma or macular degeneration? Or, if your eye pressures were high, and they kind of look at you, well, what do you mean? So it is important to say that is great. You see so well in this moment, and it's great that we can give you reading glasses or something to help you read better. But when you look at what an eye exam, a comprehensive eye exam does, is we're looking at every part of your eye. So you're having changes to the lens of your eye where it's just getting stiffer and it can't focus anymore. And that's normal. That's all. That would be weird if that didn't happen, right? That happens to everyone when we get to those certain years of 40 and older. But what we're concerned about is what you are not having a symptom of. So we're going to look in the back of the eye, and when there's over 270 diseases that could be occurring in your body, and you may not know it, and you're just categorizing yourself as, well, I have okay vision, and I could put these cheaters on to read. It's really a disservice to those patients entering the years where hypertension has a greater risk, macular degeneration, age 50 and older, leading cause of vision loss then. Cardiovascular disease is crazy. And a lot of patients who feel they're healthy can have underlying arrhythmias. And to your point, they could be having symptoms with it, and they're not articulating that to anyone because they feel they're otherwise healthy. And we know diabetes is just huge. And we can certainly see signs of that.
So you basically covered all of those things. But in my sense, when I talk to you, maybe Melissa, you could jump in here as well, is, I think it's very helpful because it's a messaging collectively. Like we would look to the AOA, for example, for messaging about this for patients, but also it has to come from their individual interactions within their doctor. And so, like in terms of the summary, Chris Wolf, 41-year-old male, comes in, and all I need is some help for my presbyopia, whether it's like a Verilux X design, or it's reading glasses, or it's a presbyopia drop, or contact lenses. Right? You manage the refractive case, but what does it sound like to remind me, Melissa, that I also have all these others, the potential for all these other diseases that you may or may not be seeing? I'm the patient. What does that sound like when it's coming out of your mouth?
Sure. And I actually do this. You might think it's crazy, but in the college age or 20-year-olds, I tell them about presbyopia as well. And what I like to do is go over all the negatives. The back of your eyes after the dilated exam look very healthy. You do not have diabetes. You do not have any signs of macular degeneration. And I just, depending on the patient, I list off a bunch of them, and a lot are based on family history. So say you have a family history of macular degeneration, I'm going to tell you that you don't have it, and also go over some things that you can do to prevent these conditions. So I start talking about presbyopia quite early on, because in the younger population, maybe their parents are becoming presbyopic. They're getting reading glasses for the first time. And you did bring up a good point here, is that we do have many options for presbyopia. So it's not just glasses, of course. We have multifocal contact lenses, we have pharmaceuticals, and that is just starting for presbyopia. We have surgical options we can offer our patients as well. And explaining, for example, I had a 20-year-old last week who was interested in LASIK, who was like minus 225 OEO sphere. And so at 20 years old, I was talking to him about presbyopia. Yes, you can go in for a refractive surgery consultation. Yes, that can correct your distance vision. But in about 20 years, this is what's going to happen. And he said, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of what I've learned in kind of thinking about this over the last couple of years specifically, I think Pam, you and I have discussed this before, is the preparing patients for things, right? Like I was involved in a panel about a year ago, and it was just kind of the lay person. I was sort of moderating lay people and their perspectives related to presbyopia. And while a lot of them felt like they could sort of solve the problem, they didn't feel like we as providers really educated them much about the process in advance, or we sort of poo-pooed it, or it was like not that big of an issue. So it's sort of normal and you can just get by with whatever. And so almost it's like, well, it's an opportunity for us. We understand it so well as being non-pathological in the sense that it's not going to cause bigger problems in and of itself. So we can kind of underplay the impact that it has on that patient's life. And so in your article specifically, you guys discuss how impactful presbyopia is on a patient's quality of life. Melissa, can you give me a sense of kind of that data?
Sure. And, I think what we've learned over the last few years, or what I've learned, is actually using the term presbyopia and using that word, because maybe before we talked about, changes or aging. I don't like to talk about aging at all, but with the classification of presbyopia by severity, we actually can use this to really help our patients. So we have the mild, the moderate, or advanced severity. And we learned from that publication as well that it's not really based on age. You could have someone who's 42 who has advanced presbyopia and someone who's, 80 or something who has moderate presbyopia. But really, presbyopia affects people so much. So it affects work productivity. It affects There are so many physical and psychological aspects of a person's life. I don't know if any of you have seen those interviews with people who are presbyopic. They are just absolutely shocking to me, like unable to see the shampoo bottle in the shower, going with all these different workarounds just to get through the day. And I think actually traveling on airplanes is one of the best places to see presbyopia, right? In action. It's dim, it's kind of dark, right? And poor contrast, and maybe you're a little tired, but all sorts of things come out of how people are compensating. But I think as eye care providers, we really need to listen to our patients and talk to them about presbyopia and give them different options. And it might not just be one option. It could be multiple options. Just like we don't have one pair of shoes, we don't wear high heels at the beach or something like that. We have many options for different situations. So we need to be creative. And that's what's so fun about it too, is that we have different options now to really help our patients with presbyopia and see very well and feel good and help improve quality of life in all sorts of different situations.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I was just going to say, Chris,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, so I'll take this opportunity to kind of have you expand on that, because, one of the things I thought in your paper was really good was, oftentimes we undervalue, Melissa, what you were talking about, like what we are doing. And you think, a patient that has arthritis or diabetes or, hypertension, that's going to really impact their quality of life. But I think the numbers were like based on a survey. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but it was like a significant number of patients. Like when you say, okay, you have this condition like arthritis, like high blood pressure or dry eye, what is the impact on your life? Like overwhelmingly, presbyopia was the number.
Yeah.
Can you give me more details about that?
Survey, sure. It was 37%. The loss in near vision affected quality of life compared to arthritis, which was 21%, high blood pressure 17%, hearing loss 16%, and dry eye I thought was so interesting because that was 5%. And I often think that dry eye, and there's so many different studies that support that dry eye really affects quality of life, but that the loss of near vision was so significant. And we all have patients who wake up one morning and suddenly they can't see anything up close. They think they're going blind. I'm sure, have both of you had those patients they call urgently?
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
I lost my vision. I'm going blind, and it's presbyopia.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of emotions that go behind being, well, like you said, Melissa, waking up one day, because it does happen that quickly to some people. They just drop off the mountain all at once. So, in a survey also, Chris, 56% of patients felt that now I'm old. And then there was a significant amount. The next amount felt frustrated. There was anxiety. And then I love the group that are totally in denial, right? So there's all these emotions. So I do try to tell my two younger associates who are giving that message compared to the senior doctor in the practice that may be giving that message to the patient, that really think of how it impacts their quality of life, but how it is coming at them from an emotional standpoint. I had a mom in the neighborhood. I was out of town traveling, and I get a text. She's like, "Lo, I got a bone to pick with you." And I'm like, "What the heck? I'm not even at the practice." And so I call her up, and she goes, "Look, I just saw your young associate, and he was great. But if someone's going to tell me I'm getting old, it's going to be you and not your young buck." So we had a chuckle about it. But I really believe that younger doctors who haven't experienced presbyopia yet need to make sure they're messaging the emotional side of it. And like I said, in our practice, we love to say, this would be strange if this didn't happen to you. This is a normal change to the lens of your eye.
Well,
and I think
you bring that up.
Because presbyopia is often the first sign of aging, right? Yeah. And that's why it's so emotional. It's the first point of someone feeling that they're old. And
it's so obvious. I mean, and like you said, it's something that you can't necessarily turn away from. If I stop working out and I kind of change my eating behaviors, it's going to be kind of this gradual progression, but I can kind of like ignore it for a while. But I can't ignore the fact that when I pick up a menu to read, or I look at my phone, I can't do this, or I'm enlarging print. It's always obvious, every single thing that you're doing all day long, as opposed to other gradual changes that could be easy signs. Like, my metabolism isn't what it was even just 5 years ago. It's not. I can totally tell. And so I've got to watch what I eat more. And so but that, if I didn't, it wouldn't be a dramatic change that's kind of punching me in the face every day, where this is sort of that way. And so, you mentioned, Melissa, about classifying presbyopia into mild, moderate, and severe, and how patients, when we think about it based in our training, we would often think that, a 50-year-old is pretty much an absolute presbyope, and they're pretty much going to need a 2 to 250 ad, maybe, but, maybe they're 250 by the time they're 55, and then beyond there, it's just, 250 forever. Or maybe it gets up to 275 because their reading distances need to increase because of mild AMD or whatever. But then now there's this kind of classification system. And what I want to know is, first, what are those kind of parameters of the numbers that we would think? Because, optometrists often think in terms of diopters. And second, why do I care? As a clinician, why do I care about the strategies in terms of communication and presenting ideas to a mild presbyope versus an absolute, or a severe presbyope? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, great questions here. And, I was very fortunate to be on this working group for the classification project. And so we went back and forth with advanced versus severe. And we actually came up with advanced because we didn't want it to sound so devastating. And so but I always have to tell myself too, it's mild, moderate, and advanced.
Advanced, okay. But maybe if I say severe, my patients will take it more take it more seriously.
Or maybe they'll
you have severe presbyopia.
The scare tactic does work well for many.
Yeah, it does.
But the level, to answer your question, the levels really directly relate to that accommodative reserve of the lens and refer to lenticular dysfunction. So we want to use this classification not just for, say, spectacle lenses, but maybe for surgical outcomes and contact lens options, and also for pharmaceutical options for presbyopia. So just so that we're all speaking the same language, so we're all on the same page. And so to answer your question as well, what are these ad powers and things like that? And it's all listed out. You can download it free of charge as well, this publication. But 125 or less is that mild, the moderate, 125 to 2, and then the advanced greater than +2. Now, and these are just guidelines that you can use. Of course, some patients require different ads for different sort of activities and tasks. And, when we're talking about different tasks and things that we're doing, all of us right now are on digital devices so much, right? And we did talk about that in this publication as well, because all of us are using digital devices. All of our patients are using digital devices. My kids are using digital devices. Everyone's using digital devices. And a 2021 study evaluated computer vision syndrome in 69 presbyopic digital device workers who are about 55 years old, and about 80% were ametropes. 65% had advanced presbyopia, and basically the prevalence of CVS after wearing progressive lenses or occupational lenses for 3 months was reduced to 68%, 33%, and 18%. So I know Pam uses these lenses a lot in her practice. So Pam, can you tell us about them?
Absolutely. So I graduated in 1988, where our world was driving, watching TV, and reading the Sunday newspaper. So, life was very different. To your point, Chris and Melissa, everyone is on digital devices now. And so the first no lines or progressives that came out were very great at cosmetically masking that line, because there's that emotion of feeling old that goes around presbyopia. But they had their faults. You could see well far away, but there was these corridors that were narrow, and you had to teach a patient how to point their nose at what they were reading. And so it could be frustrating for a good percentage of patients. Now, fast forward to today, unbelievable, especially in the Varilux X, which is our top digital progressive in our practice. So what has happened is progressives, and most progressives still today, when you look through one point in the lens, you're looking through that one point, it gives you one focal point at a certain distance. Well, now the X lenses are different, because when you look through one point, you're actually seeing multiple distances. And when you think of not only digital devices, our computers, but think of, our cars are like cockpits now. It's just crazy with what you need to see in the car. And so now that I have a design and a lens that I could look at a certain point, but it gives me a wider field of view in that arm's distance away. And it gives you a greater volume. Where the old designs, again, nose pointing, you didn't have a volume and a wideness to your vision. So now that all goes away. And when you put these lenses on, they're easier to adapt to. And part of the reason they're really easier to adapt to is because there's not that swim. We all heard of patients coming in and we talk about a progressive and no, I tried those. And when I go down steps, I feel like I'm going to fall. Well, the new designs of these have what they call nanoptics technology, and the shape of the lens is also different, along with those focal points giving you multiple distances. And so that's what's just so amazing is there is no swim. There's nothing you have to adapt to. And you guys know, I'm sure you've done this in your practice. You'll hear the optician dispense them, and the patient's like, well, it feels a little weird with my new progressive, and give it 2 weeks. Give it 2 weeks, and then you'll be fine. You got to get used to it. These new designs, there's no getting used to it. I mean, it's amazing. And I've lived through every iteration of these lenses, and there is no swim. These corridors are unbelievable, and you just feel like it's your natural vision back again.
I think that's what I've noticed as well, Pam. I think the first thing is because we've used Varilux designs for before I was in practice, and we use the Varilux X a lot. I mean, that's our primary go-to lens for most of our patients. But I'm also a presbyope, and I have none of that. I put that on. My patients don't have it, and I think the most important thing from a practice standpoint is, first, patients are satisfied and they're happy, but even the logistics of dispensing that type of a lens that's very successful and doesn't give you swim and doesn't have to have the patient handheld over time. it makes it simple in terms of, worrying about non-adapts and then worrying about, RX checks. I mean, I will tell you that probably the only time in our practice, almost the only time we ever do RX checks in our practices right now in our practice, there's 3 of us. I would say that 90% of our RX checks are when patients went and got their glasses someplace else. And then they're coming back to us because they're not working well. And so we actually have a different strategy to handle that. It's probably, we can definitely talk about that. But, my perspective on that is if we made the glasses here, I'll do RX checks at no charge. But if we determine that the problem within that RX check and it gets back to the doctor in our office, the problem was that the lenses weren't made well, or I put it in the phoropter and they're seeing 20/15 at distance and 20/15 at near, and we check all this stuff out and it's the patient's seeing 20/30, that's going to be a fee, right? Because that's more of my time that I had to spend because they went someplace else to try to get a deal. And I don't blame patients for doing that. I mean, people could disagree with that method. It's just what works in our practice. Well, listen, Melissa, Pam, this has been a great conversation. I had a ton of fun having it. And thanks so much for your time and coming on today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Chris. It's always good to be with you because it's fun with a purpose.